I was wrong. I was wrong about the Boston Celtics. I thought they would be around a 500 record. I thought Jaylen Brown would be great, but I did not imagine guys like Luca Garza, Jordan Walsh, Ugo Gonzalez showing up and carrying this team this year. And most importantly, I was wrong about Joe Mazzulla. Last night against the Indiana Pacers, Joe Mazzulla benches the entire starting unit after they go down 20, and he puts in a entirely bench group, and they bring this game all the way back, and then Joe Mazzulla puts back in the starters, and they win it down the stretch. But just the audacity to bench your entire starting unit like that, Joe Mazzulla is my favorite for Coach of the Year. But what's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtic Source. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays to you and your family on this Christmas Eve day as this is coming out. And we got a lot of things to talk about. We're going to talk about the game on Monday night. We're going to talk about Christmas Day games. We're going to preview each of those 5 matchups, some pretty intriguing matchups. And obviously, as I had mentioned over the last couple of days, we are going to go over our awards and predictions that you all voted on. We got over 45 submissions, so thank you guys very much for your support. We're going to do it again at about the halfway, 2/3 mark. I'm not sure right on the exact timing on that. Sometime later in January, February time. But I want to start with the Celtics game against the Pacers on Monday night. And we're going to sort of go through it, not really quarter by quarter, but the first half and how the Pacers got out to that sort of 20-point lead, even, given how bad the Pacers have been this season. And then we'll talk about what Joe Mazzulla was able to do and bring this game all the way back. And then in that fourth quarter, the stars were put back in, and Jaylen Brown took over from there. He had, once again, a incredible shot in the corner, almost a mirror image of that one in the 2024 Eastern Conference Finals, where he shot that over, I think it was Pascal Siakam. And in this one, he has almost a mirror image on the opposite corner, 4 seconds left, and inbound from Derek White, and he hits just a clutch 3 to take the lead. But that being said, we have to start all the way back at the beginning. And this game started with the Pacers coming in, shooting around just 32% from 3. That's probably one of the biggest, flaws of this team and why they're, having such a rough season, even without Tyrese Haliburton and getting rid of some other guys via trade and free agents. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that, you're shooting just 32%, and they shoot 60% in the first half. Just an unbelievable shooting performance from the Pacers in the second half. It wasn't helped by the Celtics as they mightily struggled defending and transition and giving up a couple offensive rebounds, which they tend to do. That's right now, they haven't been beaten that often. A lot of their, the ways they've lost games is from self-inflicted mistakes, whether that be rebounding, whether that be a couple other things. They haven't been just, thoroughly outmatched. And obviously this was the case in this game, right? Pascal Siakam, he was pretty dominant early. Boston struggled, I think, a little bit with his physicality and his size, given that they went, they start small a lot of the times, and they have, Keita, who's been out there, and we're actually going to talk about in just a second the rotations and how Joe Mazzulla is going back to more of a center lineup. But Keita, he was out there, but the Pacers did play with, 2 bigs, and what's his name, Huff or whatever. And so Keita was often guarding him, and Joe Mazzulla was putting smaller guys were getting switched on to Pascal Siakam, and he was pretty dominant in the paint. second chance points, right? Getting rebounds, stuff like that I've talked about that have hurt this team on countless occasions throughout games. And the Celtics, they trailed by 18 at half. It got to a 20-point lead early in the third quarter. But we know the state of the Pacers right now. And it just felt like this game was salvageable coming out of the half, right? 18-point leads in this game are nothing anymore. And it actually felt like Joe Mazzulla sort of pulled the plug. He took the stars out and he was like, yeah, we're not going to fight in this game. You guys are giving me no effort. We're just going to put in the bench unit and ride that the rest of the way. And, we'll just chalk this up as a loss. And that's just not what happened. Joe Mazzulla puts in the bench unit and they just go absolutely berserk. Not shooting-wise, but hustle plays, physical defense, getting out in transition, making timely threes, of course. But for the most part, it was just energy. Stuff that only Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman play with. I've talked about this before. Ugo Gonzalez has no off switch. He's 19 years old, and he can just, turn it on and go for an entire game without stopping to catch his breath. It's ridiculous what he's doing right now. But, I think it really starts with, the play where the Celtics sort of forced a rebound or forced a missed shot, and they weren't able to get the rebound. And it allowed the Pacers to get this one play where Joe Mazzulla was like, yep, I'm calling it, timeout, pulls the starters, and with about 9:20 or so left in the third quarter, Mazzulla sends that clear message, I think. A message that, if you're not going to play hard, if you're not going to put in the work and, pay attention to the little details in defensive rebounding, boxing out, forcing turnovers, stuff like that, you have to get everyone to be bought in or nobody gets bought in, right? It's like one of those things where everyone has to be doing it or it doesn't work. If one person's not doing it, it won't work because someone will be open for a opportunity to grab a rebound. But I think Joe Mazzulla, this is a good, moment to talk about Joe Mazzulla and just his coaching strategy before we talking about how they actually caught up in this game. I think we've been really hard on Joe Mazzulla over the last couple of years, right? He's had a fantastic, championship or bust roster for the last 3 or so years, if you want to count 2023 or not. And there's been moments where, he hasn't, he's made some mistakes as a young coach. He's made some, decisions that have cost the Celtics games in that way. And we saw that in 2023, I think, for sure. He was unwilling to call timeouts at a point. I think we're well beyond that by now. But it just seems like Joe Mazzulla is pulling all the right buttons this year. I mean, to be able to just take a team that on paper has nobody except Jaylen Brown, maybe Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, not enough to contend for a championship, let alone in the Eastern Conference. And he has this team at the third seed, the sole ownership of that third seed, with 2 games up on the Sixers for that second or for that fourth seed, and they're not far off from the Knicks and Pistons now. I think those teams are significantly better teams. I know the Pistons still have the 1 seed. I actually think the Knicks are a better team, and we can talk about that later. But, I mean, to be, 7 games above 500? It's just incredible. But, he does that, going back to the game here, he does that full, hockey sub out of that timeout, something that he rarely does, but he felt, in this moment, he had to teach everyone a lesson. And, I mean, the bench has earned that trust throughout the season now. The bench hasn't ever played all together like that, but individual guys have earned the trust. Joe Mazzulla bringing back Luca Garza, who I think we all thought, including me, he was, well off to the end of the bench. Down there by Chris Boucher, who we haven't seen a minute of in the last 2 months, really. But, with Luca Garza, the defense still isn't great, but he does something that is surely needed on this team, which is the offensive rebounds. Stuff that he's, I thought he was way, way out of the picture, and I think Joe Mazzulla is realizing you need another center out there, not to play together, but you can't be going small lineups for the majority of the game. You have to be playing with a 7-footer at some point, throughout the game, right? And Katie can't play full games. He's only playing whatever in the 20 or 30 minutes, and you need Garza out there just be a spark plug, really. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's going out there, he's tipping balls for offensive rebounds, he's picking up fouls and and ones, sort of going to the rim, stuff that, just gives, as I've said, it gives momentum to the team. Now, he's not, running up and down the court. He's not getting plays run for or anything, but when the Celtics miss a shot, he's right there to tip it back in. He's right there to tip it to Peyton Pritchard, for example, for a 3, or to just come down with it, go back up again, and draw a foul. Right? I mean, that just stay ready mindset that Joe Mazzulla instills in all of these guys. And, after the game, players are always like, yeah, I didn't know I was going to get an extended run. Right? Joe Mazzulla never tells them that they're going to be playing tonight. They just have to be ready. And, I've talked about this before. At one point, right, that's great for the ability of players to come in and just make an impact. But at another point, right, if you don't know, you never know when you're going to be playing, it's hard to, prepare yourself and, get in a steady rhythm, which can help players significantly as well. But it's worked so far. Anthony Simons has looked better as of late. He's more bought in on the defensive end, which is extremely beneficial. He's knocking down shots. We did a whole thing on Ugo Gonzalez the other day, which you can go check out. But Ugo Gonzalez, I don't know if he's taken Jordan Walsh's spot. Jordan Walsh has been sick over the last couple of games or so. But Ugo Gonzalez, as I've said, the energy of him is just unmatched by anybody in the league right now, it seems. And he's doing a lot of the same things Jordan Walsh is doing. He's a little bit bigger. Obviously, he can guard some bigger players. I'm not saying he's better in any way. They're really two of the same players. And we've yet to see them both out there on the court at one time. I don't know if you need that much defensive energy. But lately, we've been seeing the offense coming alive for him as well, right? And I think we all forget, right? He's played professionally since he was age 9 over in Real Madrid in Spain. So it's not like he's not prepared for this kind of environment. He's doing things at 18 or 19 that, only Cooper Flagg is doing. And Cooper Flagg, we all know, is a generational talent. And Ugo Gonzalez is not that. He's the 5th guy on this team when he's on the court in terms of offensive production. It's just incredible. But I think, we've talked about the energy. We've talked about the physicality that they brought. The Celtics just slowly chipped away at this lead. It went from 20, then it went down to 12, then 8, then 4. A 19-6 run from this bench unit without any of the stars on the court. The Pacers went 12 of 20 from 3 in that first half. They go 1 of 20 from 3 in the second half. Just a worst shooting by any NBA team this season in that second half, right? And, a lot of that comes from the Pacers missing shot, but most of the credit goes from the intensity and crowd-backed momentum that Ugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, Anthony Simons, Luca Garza were all bringing in that, late third quarter. And, I think, I think the shooting also helped, right? You know, Luca Garza made a couple of threes. Anthony Simons was making some threes, right? And we've talked about Anthony Simons and his play style. But when you're playing a full bench unit like that and you're just relying on transition opportunities, I'm okay with Anthony Simons sort of going a little ISO because his job out there is to do the offense while the rest of the team does the defensive end, and it works perfectly. And given that he's, getting better at, staying locked in on the defensive end as games go on, we're seeing a much better production from that unit as shown in this game. Now, the Pacers, as we said, did go 1 of 20 from 3 in the second half. They just had a horrendous shooting performance. But as I've said, it wasn't all the Pacers. And then, the fourth quarter comes around. The game is down to whatever, around 5, 6, 8 maybe points. I don't exactly remember the moment. But Joe Mazzulla's like, the bench unit proved a lesson. The starters are all pissed sitting on the bench. He brings the starters back in, and it's pretty much game from there. The Celtics get the lead on a huge three-pointer, as I've said at the top of the show, from Jaylen Brown in the corner. Just a ridiculous all-time shot from Jaylen Brown. And, Jaylen Brown just takes over in the fourth, entirely. 14 points in the fourth. Another game with 31 points, over 30 points. He had, I believe, 9 rebounds as well, right? Given that he sat for, probably 8 minutes or something, 8-9 minutes of actual game time in the second half there, he still gets to that 30-point mark. I think, he outscored the Pacers in the fourth quarter 14-13 just by himself, right? We've talked about, the fact that he was pissed sitting on the bench. He said that after the game. I think this is a lesson that you take from this because, Jaylen Brown, he's not used to just being benched like that. There was a couple of, games. I think they had a game last season where they lost by like 50 or whatever, and it wasn't close after the second half, and Joe Mazzulla waves the white flag and just benches everyone for the second half, but they never come back in that game. The fact that, they were able to come back in this game sort of proves a bigger lesson about how guys that are younger, less talented are outplaying you. And Jaylen Brown took it to heart and obviously just dominated in the fourth quarter. We talked about Ugo Gonzalez. We talked about Luca Garza and their physicality, their effort, their energy. I think this basically was one of those games where the Celtics sort of won without that ego of, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, who are all, I'm not going to say superstars, but all, huge, players for this team. And the fact that they were all, benched, and it showed how, just because you're the star on this team doesn't mean that you get to play if you're not putting in the effort and work. And I think this is a game that the Celtics can build on, and it's a learning moment, but it's also a win, and those are rare, right? There are very few games where you win and there's stuff to take away from it. There's always, you lost and there's those silver linings, but this is one of the few where there's, no silver linings because you win as well. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everyone. From my family to yours, I want to wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season and a fantastic start to the new year. If you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing, liking this video, sharing with others. It allows me to continue to, produce content like this, covering the Boston Celtics, the team that you love, the NBA as a whole, one of the best sports, arguably the best sport in the world. So thank you guys very much in advance. You can check out this podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify as well in audio format. It would help us out a lot if you guys could leave us a rating and review. All of that is extremely welcomed. And thank you guys once again. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 46. There are always these, under the radar check marks for teams throughout a season. I think the first is Thanksgiving. Can you get off to a fast start in the regular season? Then comes Christmas Day, and we sort of assess where these teams are. You're at about just over a third of the way through the season, so it's a great place to see where your team stands in the entire landscape of the NBA. You have the All-Star break as well. That sort of stretch between Christmas and the All-Star is a pretty long stretch, and things can change tremendously. But man, do we have a great slate of NBA games on Christmas Day this year. And I know the NFL, has sort of retaken or taken over that day, but with so many of the teams already eliminated from playoffs, the NBA should have most of the viewers, because some of these games are not only playoff previews, some of them are rematches from earlier in the season. NBA Cup rematch in the 2 p.m. mark between the Thunder and the Spurs. We're going to preview that. We're going to preview all these games. Just some fantastic watches around the NBA on Christmas Day. But I think we start with the early game. We'll just go in order here. These two teams in the 12 p.m. mark are the only two Eastern Conference teams. This matchup looked great coming into the season with the projected top two teams in the Eastern Conference in the Cavs and the Knicks. And the Cavs, I think they're going to get embarrassed on Christmas Day because they have not had a great start to the season. In fact, they are well under where players, teams, fans expected this team to be. Right? I probably had this team as the best team in the Eastern Conference, and they're, I think they're not even in the play-in right now. Maybe they're, just in the play-in. They're one game above 500. They have definitely had a lot of injuries that have derailed this season, and I expect them to get it around, figure this out, because they just have too much talent not to. But they're shooting at, career lows. Some of their star players in Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, play a huge part in the failures of this team. Evan Mobley's been out a little bit as of recently, but when he's been in, I'm not saying he's had a bad season, but he's well under, what he had last year when he was a, quote-unquote top 10 player in the NBA as, sort of noted by the second-team All-NBA selection, right? That sort of says you're a top 10 player in the NBA, given that it's now positionless, right? If it was if you had positions, right, he probably wouldn't be on that list. But that being said, he has not played great. Darius Garland has been horrific from shooting. The Cavs are, a lot of the players are shooting in the low 30s. Donovan Mitchell has really been the only guy that has, held his stride, you could say. And I think that the one player, right, you can double him as much as you want right now because other guys are not filling in the gaps. As for the Knicks side, right, the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's played well. I think this team is probably going to overtake the Pistons at some point this season, as I said earlier on the show. Just because I think the Pistons, they're a great team, but they have that one fatal flaw, which is they're not a great three-point shooting team, and I think that will come back and hurt them. I'm not saying the Pistons aren't going to be able to make a run in the playoffs or anything. They're definitely, them and the Knicks are far away the best two teams in the East, although the Celtics are catching up slowly. But that being said, the Knicks are playing well right now, best they've played all season, and the Cavs are not playing well, and I think this game is going to be, if the Cavs don't figure it out, it's going to be a utter domination for the Knicks. The second game is the game that I think they probably should have moved to. I guess, a lot of people will be watching to, I guess there's not really a better time because you don't want to do it during dinner, but Spurs Thunder is going to be one of the best games of the day, right? They already played in the NBA Cup. That was one of the best games of the season. The Spurs holding on, snapping the Thunder streak. By the way, the Thunder have lost 2 games in the last week now to the Spurs and to the Wolves on Friday night. Um, the Spurs are looking to make a statement here, saying that they've arrived. They have now beaten the champs twice, the reigning champs, and the team that's projected to possibly break the winning record or wins record for a season at 73. And I think this is a possible Western Conference finals sort of preview. I don't know if these two teams will make it all the way. It just depends on how the sort of bracket shapes out. You still have the Rockets and the Nuggets who also play on Christmas Day. We'll talk about that next. But that being said, Wemby, he's back. Hartenstein's back for the Thunder. And, I know the matchup is the, Chet versus, Holmgren versus Wemby. They don't often go one-on-one because just they play, it's funny, centers usually don't guard other centers, right? There are some centers that, are not historically great defensively or are more help defenders like Wemby is, right? Wemby's not going to be doing great, point of attack defense. He's going to come over from his man and block a shot, something like that. And that's why you put him on a smaller, guard or something that is not as talented or is not the main, source of offense for the other team, which is, why it's, I'm not going to say it's sad to see Wemby and Chet. They don't often go one-on-one. But that being said, they're going to have some, moments in the game where, Wemby blocks Chet or Chet blocks Wemby or, gets dunked on, and that just highlight reels for the ages. The last 3 games here, I think, are all great games. I mean, the NBA has done a great job of picking games, as they always do for Christmas Day. Mavericks Warriors, that's probably the worst of the 5, but it's still going to be fun to see Cooper Flagg play on Christmas Day, his first Christmas Day experience. I'm sure there'll be many more to come. And, the Warriors, they should win, but I'm not really sure because the Warriors have had such an up and down season. I don't know if you guys saw on Monday it was, but Draymond Green, Steve Kerr calls a timeout. Draymond Green is, pretty upset, and they're arguing at each other in the timeout. Draymond Green, decides, this is early in the third quarter, by the way, decides to leave the court and go to the locker room. He didn't come back out. Steve Kerr said he wasn't going to play anyway, had he come back out, but he just stays in there for the entire game. The Warriors lose. So just a weird, environment going on in Golden State. They're at 15-15, right? Not where you wanted this team to be. Bringing in all the veterans that they did. Al Horford has not played well this season. And it's just a rough state for the Warriors right now. As for the Mavs, they did lose to the Pelicans the other night, but they do have some signature wins. They are on the upcoming. I think ever since they took, Cooper Flagg off the ball and put him in that, his normal power forward position, he's excelled, and this team is getting better now. They still have some bad losses like they had against the Pelicans, but they have some signature wins on the season as well. And then, the late night games here. First one, Rockets, Lakers. Yes, the Rockets have dropped some games to some lottery teams as well. They brought in Kevin Durant for, crunch time situations, clutch games, and they haven't been a great crunch time team. I think the Lakers, they still need to play a little bit better defense transitionally. They're getting sort of ran out or outrun on some nights as well. And that Rockets have that ability to run on them as well. But that crunch time, situation, I trust the Lakers more just because you have, Luca Doncic, you have Austin Reeves, you have LeBron James, all 3 players that could win you a game at any moment. And the Rockets, they have Kevin Durant. They have some of their young point guards that have been playing well. And I think it really hurts not having Fred VanVleet as your traditional point guard that can facilitate play in the final 5 minutes of a game. But that being said, they shouldn't be this bad in crunch time. So we'll see what happens with that one. I think, we talked about the 2 o'clock game, Wemby and the Spurs against, SGA and the Thunder going out against each other. But I think, the second best game to that one is the latest game of the day between the Nuggets and the Wolves. I mean, this has turned into a great rivalry, a battle of the coaches, who's going to get ejected first. But, all jokes aside, the Wolves, they're coming off against some big wins where they beat the Thunder on Friday. They beat the Bucks over the weekend. I think tonight, as I'm recording this, they played the Knicks, so we'll see how that happens, or the result of that game. You'll know by the time this episode comes out. But, this game is definitely a potential, Western Conference Final preview as well, or maybe second round matchup. They've matched up in the playoffs for the last couple of years. Splitting sort of. The Nuggets have played really well. Anthony Edwards has played extremely well as of recently, and these two players are just, they love going at it. And Anthony Edwards is going to bring the trash talk with him. Nikola Jokic is much more of a casual player, but you see him bring out the emotions sometimes as well, and it's just going to be an extremely fun game to watch later that night. All right, it's time to go over your picks for MVP and other awards. We got 53 total votes, so thank you guys very much. That is more than I expected for sure. And we're going to go through for the MVP at least and rank each one by, I picked 10 players that I thought were providing the most for their teams. You were able to rank them, and depending on where you put them, I gave, 1 point for each spot they were, right? So if you were the first spot, I gave 10 points, 9 points for second, 8, 7, all the way down, right? And with, the 10th spot getting just 1 vote for each vote that went there. And I think the best way to do this is just go through each one and see if I agree with where you all voted for. But yeah, without further ado, at number 10, with all 53 votes going towards that number 10 spot, it is Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant, he hasn't had a bad season. He's had a great season, in fact. I just think there are, other players that are having bigger stat lines that are providing more for their team than Kevin Durant is. So I would pretty much agree with this one, especially because you bring in Kevin Durant to be that, crunch time player, and the Rockets haven't been great in clutch time. So yeah, at number 10, Kevin Durant, I agree with this one fully. Number 9, with 13 8th place votes and 40 9th place votes, it is Giannis. And, Giannis, he hasn't quite missed enough games. I think by the end of the season, I'm sure he will have missed more than 17 games, and so we'll take him off the list for that next voting. But as of now, he hasn't, so I kept him on there. It makes sense that he's down there in the 8th spot, or the 9th spot, sorry. Without their team, without him on the court, this team is well into the lottery team. But with him on the court, they're still only a 500 team anyway, so just, a terrible season for Milwaukee. Who knows what's going to happen with Giannis going forward anyway. At number 9, that makes sense. At 8, sort of flipping with Giannis with 48 place votes and 13 second place votes, 13 ninth place votes, it is Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell is putting up one heck of a stat line. 30 points a night. The assists are up. Right, he continues to do this year after year, but the Cavs have struggled mightily, as I have said over the course of this episode. And so, yeah, it makes sense that, he's providing a lot for his team, but the team isn't good enough for him to be in the high, consideration for MVP anyway. At, seventh, it is Jaylen Brown, with 2 6th place votes and 51 7th place votes. I will just reveal that number 6 is Cade Cunningham with 51 6th place votes and 2 7th place votes. It's very interesting, why, you all picked Jalen Brunson over Cade Cunningham. Obviously, Jalen Brunson's coming up at some point. Given that, the Pistons have a better record right now. And funny enough, I actually agree because, I just think the Knicks are a better team right now, and Jalen Brunson's providing more for his team at the moment than Cade Cunningham is. That could change by the end of the season if the Pistons still have the number 1 record in the East. But as for these two, Brown, right, he's carrying the Celtics team right now. Without him, I don't know where this team would be, scoring 30 points a night, rebounding, playmaking, facilitating, all of that. Jaylen Brown's doing a great job. I just think 7th is probably a good spot for him. It'd be nice for him to be a little higher. Selfishly, I think he probably is a little bit higher, but he's not better than any of the players coming up. So it just probably makes sense to have him where he is. Obviously, Cade Cunningham at 5th. It's Jalen Brunson with 11 4th place votes and 42 5th place votes. I think 5th spot's good for him. He's below, I won't reveal it yet, but he's below 2 players that I think he's pretty even with in terms of, his scoring ability and his playmaking. I think the 2 players coming up right above him are pretty equal with him, but I just think that, Jalen Brunson does have Karl-Anthony Towns with him, obviously, and some other players. And Mike Brown's doing a great job coaching as well. I just think that, that sort of 5th spot's a good spot for him. Right below Luca Doncic, which is crazy to me. The fact that you think that he's the 4th spot. Funny enough, he does get 10 third place votes, 40 4th place votes, and 3 5th place votes as well. The guy above him is Anthony Edwards, and Anthony Edwards is on a tear right now. I don't know if it's just the sort of recency bias that has put you on this, but Luka's had, I think, a little bit of a better season so far. But that being said, the Wolves are surging right now, and I'm not sure what the record is right now. I think the Wolves are close to passing the Lakers. If not, they already have passed them. But these 2 players, are some of the best guards in the NBA, let alone the Western Conference. Anthony Edwards, the trash talking, backing it up. It's just been brilliant to watch Anthony Edwards play right now. He's my favorite player outside of the Celtics players to watch right now. Luka Doncic, yes, the defense, still has its ups and downs. He's very slow, methodical play style. But that being said, he's averaging a near triple-double a night. I think it's obvious, the number 2 spots. It's SGA and Jokic. SGA edges out Jokic with a 28 first place votes and 25 second place votes. And then obviously Jokic with 25 first place votes and obviously 28 second place votes. I'm pretty torn on who I give it to right now. I think statistically, Jokic might be having a slightly better season. Obviously, SGA has the scoring title. They are far and away the best team in the league. Having lost only 3 games, they might break the record this season. That's an edge for SGA. Obviously, you know, he won it last year, so I don't know if there's a little bit of voter fatigue in there. But that being said, Jokic won it the last couple of years as well, with Embiid in there as well. So I don't know if because they went with SGA, they'll go with Jokic again this season. But I think it's pretty even, and because the Thunder have the best record and most likely will end up with the best record at the end of the season, I probably agree, vote SGA, just because of that. But I think dead even, same record, I think you give a dual MVP. But yeah, we're gonna wrap up this segment. We're gonna do this part again at about 2/3 of the season. Right around the All-Star break. I don't know when the actual mark is. We'll do the same thing. I'm gonna send out the form a little bit earlier so we can get hopefully a couple more votes. But that being said, that this is my first try at it. I'm extremely satisfied with the results. Just to go through the other things that I had on there, Rookie of the Year. Obviously, it's Cooper Flag. I think Con Knipple, actually, the brothers from Duke, is putting on a good, fight for second place right now. What is he averaging? 4 threes a night. Fastest player to break. Was it 100 threes or something like that? Faster than Curry was able to do it. Obviously, he takes a lot more threes than teams were taking back then when Curry came into the league. Right, he's what is he taking, like 6 threes a game, making 4 of them, something like that. So just incredible work that he's doing on a team that still has its ups and downs. Not a great team, still a lottery team. Partly because your superstar in ball is a little crazy and ridiculous. We all know that. Who knows what's going to happen with him? But that being said, Con Knipple is thriving. Championship, straightforward, Thunder. Coach of the Year, this was an interesting one. A lot of people had Mark Daigneault, JB Biggerstaff. Joe Mazzulla's in there. I think Joe Mazzulla, obviously a little biased here, but I think Joe Mazzulla has done a fantastic job. Ultimately, you guys did go with Mark Daigneault. I know they have a great team already, but he's just, providing an even bigger spark for that team. Coming off a championship, there's no letdown, none of that. It's incredible to watch. And then defense, it is Wemby. I think Wemby is not going to be eligible to win it when it all comes down. But right now, Wemby is just putting on historic numbers, right? I mean, a block a game, it's just incredible. I mean, I think he's on like 100 games, 120 games with a block or something like that. So just impressive to watch. But yeah, we're gonna wrap up this episode right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow on social media. Listen to this podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. I hope you and your family have a fun Christmas day watching these NBA games. We are going to go live after the final game, so around midnight, whenever the game ends, actually, and we'll react to all the Christmas Day games. So make sure to check that out tomorrow night. And until next time, go Celtics.